is Laura. I'm a psychic medium and an Usui Reiki master here on YouTube. And I channeled Sinead O'Connor. I apologize if you hear any background noise. There's some construction next door and people talking really loudly, so there's unfortunately not much I can do about that. That like an Irish song or something? Because when I was a kid, my mom would rock me in the rocking chair and sing Turaluralura to me before I went to bed. He did a movie in Ireland called Hushabye. And so I Googled it and I was like, oh, there it is. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And you know, as always, this video is alleged for entertainment purposes only. So Sinead O'Connor's death was really misunderstood. I really didn't appreciate when they came out trying to insinuate that she committed suicide, because there's absolutely no way that she offed herself. She was on the search for who let her son out of that hospital before he did what he did. And it's ridiculous. So I had an issue with that because it's so wrong to try and sway public opinion like that, and that's not how she passed away. So yeah, she died of a broken heart. And I don't always know specifically when someone's gonna die. That's not always how my gifts work. But with Sinead, even though I never met this woman, I don't know this woman from a hole in the ground, I only know of her. She, like about a few months before her passing, I knew she was going to pass. It just felt like her time was up. She's had so many heartbreaks. She's had constant heartbreaks since the day she was born. And she's had it from her mother, she's had it from her father, she's had it from her family. She's been scapegoated. She has had it from the men she's dated. She has also had some healthy relationships with the men that she's dated. In a weird way, she was close with one of the men she's had her 4 children with. She's had 4 children with 4 different men, I think, right? But she had a close relationship with one of them up until her death, and he was at her funeral. Believe it or not, Sinead didn't lose her career like everybody thinks she did. She did in Canada. She did in the United States when she ripped up a picture of the Pope on Saturday Night Live, which I watched, by the way, as a kid, and I shouldn't have been staying up to watch. But she still had her career in Ireland. I think she did all over the UK, actually, but not in Canada and not in the United States. And how when she ripped up that picture, nobody said anything. I remember the dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. You could cut tension with a knife when she ripped up that picture. And nobody supported her for that. She got shamed. And I just thought that they were all cowardly hypocrites, because to me, it doesn't take somebody gifted to have common sense about what the church has been doing to children, what the Catholic Church is known for doing to children. And when I say that, I'm not saying every single priest or the Pope or every cardinal, is doing that. Everybody in the Vatican is abusing children. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying there's a pretty alarmingly large majority of people in the Vatican, in the Catholic Church, who are doing that and have been doing that. And yes, there is ritual abuse in that. If you do your research, you'd be really disturbed to know about that. There's the Red Shoe Club theory. And personally speaking, I believe it. And I even thought it was a little crack pipe theory, but I don't think that anymore. In fact, I was brought up Catholic, and I always had a bone to pick with the Catholic Church myself, because they're a bunch of hypocrites as far as I'm concerned. And I remember Perez Hilton mentioned me in one of his Instagram stories a few years back, because I remember the Pope was slut-shaming Kim Kardashian. And make no mistake, I'm not a Kardashian fan, especially after the Balenciaga thing. I won't ever... Once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So I will never support the Kardashians or any of those celebrities. However, when the Pope slut-shamed her when she visited the Vatican, I pointed out to Perez what a bunch of hypocrites they are, because first of all, who are you to judge a woman by how she dresses? Who are you to even talk to a woman like that? And I mean, people have to bow down, call you your excellency, and kiss your ring. What made you holier than thou? You're not God. I'm not going to kiss anybody's anything. And so you're just a person, as far as I'm concerned. It's just really gross. I never understood that idol worship garbage, because it's not of God. And I always had an issue with, like, I visited the Vatican when I went to school for chef training. And this is back 2008, 2009. And I just remember how dark it felt. It felt dark. It didn't feel godly. And there was perfectly preserved bodies in caskets. And they said that that happened because they're saints. And I'm like, yeah, I bet. That's not normal. It was a gross display of wealth. I just had such an issue with it. I wasn't surprised, though, when they did it, because the Catholic Church is always quite nasty when they get called out. Look what they did with Pete Davidson. He started getting death threats. They were calling his mom at their house in Staten Island, and he got death threats. He was talking about this on Saturday Night Live because he was, pretty much calling out the Catholic Church for abusing children as well, in a like a comedy skit thing. It was tongue-in-cheek, but I mean, there was honesty there, and they didn't like that, so they were pretty much calling for him to, like, apologize. They have some audacity to ask anybody to apologize, because what they did to the Irish and what they've done to the children and the women and what they've done to the Native Canadians, you have got to be kidding me with expecting an apology from anybody calling you out. You're not so righteous now, are you? They're so quiet about it now, but they were so like, we deserve an apology, we deserve an apology. And then as soon as something happened to the Native children in Canada and their bodies were buried back up, the evidence came back up, all of a sudden he apologizes briefly and then that's it. And yes, I realized there are two different popes from when she ripped up that picture way back when, and what happened recently 5 years ago. But I just think if you're of God, right, and people are giving death threats and agreeing with the Pope, and the Pope doesn't say anything and defend the person, even if the person disagreed with them, to me that speaks volume of how ungodly you are, because really you were okay with Pete getting death threats, and you were totally fine with Sinead's career being gone, at least in Canada and in the United States, and you were fine with her being booed on stage when Chris Christopherson had to hug her and console her. God bless that man. And you're pissy about it, but crickets, right? Didn't hear you say anything. Didn't hear you do the right thing, nor would I expect you to. They have a history of what they've done to the Irish, and Sinead really wants that information to come across very strongly, because it bothers her to this day. Like, she's fighting on the other side for justice and vindication. And I heard it's all going to come to light. It's all going to come to light soon. And I'm getting a 7-year time frame. And it's just dark. I feel like we're going to hear more about underground tunnels soon. So buckle up. Just too much like a repeated pattern of humiliation and degradation. And we need to constantly bring up Ratzinger. We need to keep bringing that up. We need to keep bringing these things up in the Catholic Church's face. We need to keep calling them out. I don't understand why anybody goes to the Vatican now. I don't understand why anybody wouldn't feel how dark that energy is. And I, for the love of God, can never understand why so many people in Italy are so... like, this is their celebrity, basically. It's like a big deal for them. And, we need to break those traditions, because those traditions are toxic and harmful. I actually had, first 12 years of my life, this woman, my babysitter, and her husband, they lived across the street from an elementary school that I went to, and they were right from Italy. And he kept homing pigeons in his shed, and I got to, pet the pigeons, and they never clucked at me or anything. And the squib was really cute, you know, the squibs, the baby pigeons, and I really had a connection with those birds. I just really loved a lot of their culture, but I have noticed there's, like every culture, there's a little bit, you know, there's positive and negatives, and the negatives was the toxicness when it came to like a really old school, old way of thinking and being so rigid and stubborn and refusing to look at things in a different way, even if they don't agree. There's that rigid viewpoint where they don't want to maybe consider that their idol worship, their Pope, their Vatican, maybe isn't godly. Maybe it's not the God they worship, allegedly, right? I mean, maybe it's not as good as they think it is. You know, just my opinion. Everything is my opinion in this video. Except for all the stuff they've done to the Irish and the Native Canadians. Those are factual. Those are not my opinions. And I remember being a kid, and I feel like I didn't need to see Jesus depicted on the cross. I don't feel like I needed to see those acts of violence. I feel like they could have gotten their point across about what happened to Jesus without me having to see all of that. I feel like I didn't need to see eat of my flesh, drink of my blood. I thought that was weird. They do rituals in front of you. They do magic in front of you. And then they're telling you magic is evil. But it's real. Is it though? Is it evil? Doesn't it depend on intention? You know, these are things to kind of think about. They light incense. You know, it's not necessarily evil, is it? Praying for your food, praying over your food, you know, praying for people. Those are sending out energy. That's magic. Anyway, back to Sinead, because I'm kind of going on a tangent here with the Catholic Church. I just feel like nobody should have that much money and power to have their own country, to have their own big giant building with real gold leaf everywhere and paintings and billions of dollars worth of nice things, while they're telling people to take a vow of poverty, and they're going by the Old Testament, which is mostly confessing your sins to a priest, which I always thought was weird. Even as a 6-year-old kid, you were kind of forced to do that. There was no choice, and it was very culty. Just because you can leave a religion doesn't mean it's not a cult. You know, if you're telling me how to think, to me that's a cult. I don't care if anybody else disagrees. That's what it is to me. And you're indoctrinating people at an early age. It's really weird. Why are you doing that? Why don't you let people think for themselves? Why are we going by the Old Testament? Is it to fear God, our Creator? Is it to put the fear of God into people? Because that's the old Catholic way. And I always found that very toxic. I am still healing from the damage that it's done. And many people are. And I just think it's a really toxic religion. I'll never for the life of me understand why people go. Their churches are pretty. The music sometimes is all right, but that's about it. She ripped up that picture. Good for her. I don't think she should have had to apologize for that. She was making a point, and it's valid. And what better way to get people's attention than to do it when she was done singing on Saturday Night Live? Right, Sid? Sid agrees with me. I saw Prince in a video, and I randomly thought, I want to channel him. And I kept getting songs like Purple Rain. And then I realized that Prince had a really bad altercation with Sinead, or should I say Sinead had a really bad altercation with Prince. And so she talked about, and this isn't from me picking up on this is from me seeing her, I think on Piers Morgan, was it? It was somebody a few years ago, and she talked about how Prince chasing her around his car, and she's trying to get away from him and run to the nearest neighbor because they're having dinner, and he was pissed that she sang Nothing Compares to You, which was his written work. And I don't think it was her fault. I think it was like the producers or whatever that had that song together, and she didn't know it was a problem. She just wanted to reiterate that he did a lot of drugs. And she doesn't have any beef with him now. I mean, they're both passed over, you know, same kind of dimension. She's glad that he started trying to talk about what was going on in that industry before he passed on. The slate's clean, she says, with him. But it's funny because I feel like they're going to get another lifetime together. Kind of have to clear up some karma, because they ended on a really bad note. So, and that can happen. She said to listen to your inner voice, and that especially for women, she wants us to listen to our intuition more, especially when it comes to our body and reproductive issues. She wants us to be more outspoken with her doctors, especially male doctors, and to make that face because many male doctors just don't listen, and I don't feel like they try to get it, but there's some that do, not many. But anyway, she shares frustration with us in that, and she also wants us to talk about those things with people because it's important. It's important to talk about. A lot of her trauma, it started with the church and with her mother. She's been very open about that. She's been sexually, physically, verbally, mentally, emotionally abused. I think sometimes financial too, from her mother at least. That is a lot to have on your plate. Her eye shape, to me, looked kind of Piscean. She says, as you know, my mother was abused, so she abused me. She liked to call me ugly a lot, and I later realized that there's a lot of jealousy and outward projection from how her father allegedly abused her. But she also said there's a lineage of females in her family that have suffered the same fate and the same abuse, and from the Catholic Church, allegedly, my opinion only. She said growing up, she's had many people spit on her, and that it killed her spirit in a way, a lot of ways. She said she carried a lot of pain, which ended up causing arthritis, and I'm gonna have to look that up. So I asked her, I said, if you don't like the Catholic Church very much, which I can understand personally speaking, why were you Muslim closer to the mid-end of your death? Because I said I particularly feel like a lot of it promotes hate towards women and violence, especially Sharia law and things like that. And she said it was not my experience like that at all. She said she felt respected by the men, and she searched a sense of, like, she was looking for a sense of belonging, and she found it within that religion. And then she got into the song I Do Know Mandica. She said she was, throughout her life, she's kind of looking at different religions to try and figure out where she fit the best. Near the end of her passing, she took up with a lot of meditation. She said she found peace with it, and she found it to be as far from Catholicism as possible. She said that they liked how they saw God differently. I don't fully know how much of that, because I am not as familiar with that, but yeah. She said that with it, she also felt closer to God and that she got some closure. She says that she can understand now on a deeper level, now that she's no longer bipolar, that she understands why there's so much of the demise of her relationships with her children's fathers. And she said for the most part, she doesn't feel like it was their fault. She felt like it was more in terms of her reactions to things from the traumas she endured before she met these men, because she said she projected those things out in her relationships. That's not to say that they're not, they haven't been wrong either, because it can take two to tango, and of course I wasn't there, but that's what she's telling me. Especially the one that she was closest to that was at her funeral. She said something about Bill O'Connor, the Scottish comedian. Who is hilarious, by the way. I'm not quite sure what she's saying about him, but she just mentioned his name. She said that Mandica to her was about personal choice and freedom, and she doesn't really get too much into anything else other than that. And I just heard Keeper of the Flame, which has to do with St. Bridget, Celtic, Irish, pagan Keeper of the Flame. She said, my child is with me, the one who passed away, right? And it feels it feels distant. So he's with her, but he's not with her. He has to repeat a life cycle to make different decisions, and that does usually happen when somebody commits, I think it's so ridiculous of all the censorship, but commit suicide. Why can't we say that word? That's what it is. Sinead says that the system he was put in, aka the hospital, was completely and totally corrupt. She said, did they let him out when they knew that he was on a high suicide watch? She said it was a blonde-haired, stupid, incompetent, careless woman who's skinny and pale. That's how she described what she looks like, because she knows who it is now. When she passed away, she immediately knew who did it. Brown eyes. And she called her dumb. And she said that she let him go because there wasn't enough fucking beds. So, same old story. It's the same old song and dance, right? That's a song. Anyway, that's the way it is in Canada, too. If there's not enough beds, they let you go. I mean, it's going everywhere. It's going on everywhere. I think she talked about them privatizing healthcare in Ireland or something, not being very good over there with the healthcare. I don't live there, so I don't fully know what that means. She said it's obtuse and people need help. She said the only thing they offer is medication and an in and out system. She described it as like a revolving door. And then she plays the song Thank You for Hearing Me. She said she's on our side. Healers, but the authentic ones, she says not the airheaded ones that have their head up there, you know what. I randomly asked her thoughts on Sylvia Browne. She says I bleeping love Sylvia Browne. So I don't know if she knew who she was when she was alive, but she knows who she is now and she thinks she's fantastic. If you asked me about her when I was alive, I'd tell you that I don't know much about her, but I love her all the same. I really admire psychics, their intelligence. There's a higher intelligence that I really liked about them, and surprise, surprise, I was one. Very clairsentient, and I hear. So I could hear messages and things like that. If I told you then that I had a strong connection to God and that I could often hear him to help the children, you would think I was nuts. I love children. Why do you think I had 4 of them? I love children. They're God's little miracles, pure souls, and we condemn them. It's really sick. It's a world of great suffering, and it's really evil and cruel, especially for children. Humans corrupted them, and that's not how it's supposed to be. We suppress their little voices. Why do we do that? We need to speak up and say no more. Stop the constitutional rights of man. Stop the crazies who run this world. Call out organized religions. They're just glorified cults in cloaks. Men in cloaks. Look it up. They're cloaks. They're robes. They're little toys and gadgets. If it's not properly serving you, it's not for you. She points to the third eye, which looks like a pine cone. The pineal gland. And there is a crystal behind here, believe it or not, like a real crystal. Science, look it up. And she mentions rainbow children. So I don't know if she has one, if the one who passed away was one. I'm not quite sure, but that is all I got for Sinead O'Connor. And I wish I got more, but I don't have any more than that. She doesn't really have too much more to say anyway. And that's it. Thank you. Bye.